Hello, welcome back to the Evolve podcast from FintechOS. I'm delighted to be joined by someone I've known for many years, Ben Spencer, now with Folio Group. Welcome, Ben. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Gerry. Thanks for having me on.
No, been looking forward to it. There might be some people watching this that don't know you, on the off chance. Just give us a little bit of background as to what you've been doing. I know you've been in insurance for 20 odd years, but what have you been up to and what's happening with Folio Group?
Yeah, great. I've been working now in insurance in specialty insurance for over 25 years. Always in IT, but in business transformation through to the technology side as well. I was lucky enough to be a CIO for quite a few years at that time. A few well-known companies like Beazley and then latterly Everest. Okay. And then more recently, I've decided to really work with one of my old colleagues, Paul Willoughby at Folio Group, where we're really looking how we can help MGAs, carriers, and also vendors like yourselves on how to kind of position themselves in the market and really reach the ambitions of their digital transformations.
Fantastic. I think that's why I was particularly keen to get you in to talk on the subject we've got today, which is obviously we're in the insurance world. Big focus for FintechOS, but today we want to talk about innovation really. And I know from your background, we've known each other for 11 years across those companies that you've mentioned. Probably nobody better suited to talk about innovation, but perhaps the challenges of launching new products into the market. It's something that is very close to our hearts at FintechOS. It's the core of what we do, but we also see some of the challenges for businesses out there in that space. And I guess one of the things that we talk to our potential clients around, and our existing clients actually, is everyone's got some great ideas around new products that could be launched and new parts of the market to get to. But the sort of the open question we pose to them is from having the idea of a new product to taking your first premium, how long is it really? How long would it take you to do that? And I know this is something that you've sort of wrestled with over the years, but give us your thoughts on what you've seen and what a typical idea to premium journey looks like.
Yeah, well, I think Paul and I were very fortunate to work for quite a time at Beazley, which was got a fantastic reputation for being innovative. Which, when you work in the technology side of Beazley, that puts a lot of pressure on you to actually respond to that reputation and make sure that you are delivering new products and product variations at the pace that the company demands and the market expects. So I think your question can be answered like lots of different ways. The answer is very varied in my experience. For example, Beazley created cyber as a product. I think very at the forefront of that innovation. That took many years to kind of create that product and then gradually move into that space and lead the industry. But I think you can then have maybe more of a realistic scenario for lots of insurance companies, which was at Beazley as well, is that you have an underwriting team join or a lead underwriter join your company who brings with them a lot of product experience of an existing product that maybe you don't already operate in. Okay. So as an organization, you've got to learn how that product then sits within this new organization for that product. And that can just take, in my experience, over a year to achieve, from that underwriter arriving to actually going launching properly. And then it depends on the channel that you're trying to go down. So is the way you underwrite or sell that product, is that going to be different in using different ways, different means of a channel? So is it B2B to C? So have you got some kind of client-facing interface that you've got to think about, so a web portal? Or is it actually just an underwriter underwriting that and making a risk decision through the normal channel that you've probably already got used to, maybe Lloyd's, or maybe in the US if it's an email submission channel. So it can really vary, I find.
And obviously at FintechOS we're approaching that sort of with the IT platform sort of side of things, but clearly it's not just about IT, it's about the business side as well. So how do you see that sort of separacy in terms of the IT stuff and the business stuff, and where's the critical path really? How do we shorten that?
It's a good question. So I think what we found in our experience is you can start, let's say you want to start e-trading a product, with a broker. As an example, you'll get that underwriter will arrive in your organization, or that underwriter will be promoted into that role, and you can quickly come unstuck if you haven't done the pre-work, which is really to understand, well, what kind of premium are we chasing? What is our true goal? What's our North Star, as I would say? What are we aiming for? Well, we're aiming for this much premium in year one, but how does that translate to number of submissions, number of quotes, number of bound policies, and really understand the proper makeup of what that product is? And that's a lot of pre-planning. And then you've got to, as you become competent at writing these, let's in this example, the e-traded products, you've got to then start introducing gates and saying, well, we're not actually going to have those conversations unless your premium can reach this number, or you can prove to us that you've got the broker relationships to get this level of submissions.
So how does that, because I think you're kind of touching on process there a little bit. We've got people, process, technology is the three main elements, but who should own that, and where you've seen it done well, who owned it, and obviously the converse of that's true as well. Anywhere where people are perhaps have ran down the hill trying to get the product out without doing those things.
Yeah, well, I think you've got to have like an organising team member, an organising force, let's call them, which could be your IT team, because we often are, we know how to organise ourselves into sprints, etc., and structure a proper delivery. But it could just be a business change function with IT part of that as well. But you've got to have that area, that owner of the actual process, who reports it to the right governance groups and actually says, this is where we're going, this is the gate that we're going through now, have we got permission to move forward? So you need someone who can really organise the troops.
So that feels like it would potentially add time at the start, but you'll reap the benefits later on. What have you seen in terms of people being willing to do that, or even having the thought process to do that?
Well, so depending on where that person comes from, you end up with quite a skewed plan if you're not careful.
Yeah, so, that's why it's IT plan or a business plan. Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up them being quite skewed to that person's background. That's just natural. So the way you compensate for that, in my experience, is you make sure there is a proper representation on that product delivery team from multiple functions, and you create what we call a cross-functional team, which is made up of all the key functions that will be responsible for not only implementing the product but also looking after it in a longer term. So that would be underwriter, obviously, operations, technology, compliance, actuarial, finance, and really think about how you can build that team. And if you're lucky enough to be of a scale to actually put people full-time into that team, or at least 50% into that team, then they can be then really responsible for driving the products forward, in my view.
And what about so if we talk about the sort of critical path through that project, which we might be scaring people off here with the amount of planning they need to do, but this is all about getting the right answer. What can we take? How can we shorten that critical path? Because there's clearly a lot to do. What can we do simultaneously, and what can we do shorter and quicker and better?
Well, I've been surprised, and my teams have often come back to me and reported quite surprising interactions with those kind of meetings to begin with, when you're starting to, roll out a new product for a team. In that maybe the underwriters have already been underwriting this product for a couple of years, and that they've been doing that more manually, and that what you're trying to do now is give them more support so they can scale that product. What we find is actually the product is very poorly defined. Right. And there is a lot of, as you have those conversations, quite a lot of disagreement within the underwriting team, across operations, across finance, about actually what are the product definitions. Okay. So getting a way to kind of, for people to see and visualize that product, and this is where kind of prototyping comes in, because I'm an IT guy by background. I used to write specs for a living when I first started. I love a nice functional spec and a data diagram and a flow diagram. Well,
that's enough of that, Ben. It's just trying to be an entertaining podcast. Come
on. But we're IT people, right? That's our language, and that lots of other people just not that can't interpret that information in the way that you're trying to precisely write it, in my experience. So showing someone something that's working, a working prototype, and then giving them what that visually looks like on a screen is far better, I think, than the actual written word or the kind of user stories, etc. So I think getting something quickly iterated, which is maybe 50% defined, that really starts then sparking in people their ability to comment and add and change what's actually been done. So I think, if you can iterate a product really quickly, which I know, like, for example, FintechOS, you can bring in a product and use an AI wizard to help you kind of define that product. Getting that product up and going in a few days, based on that initial thought of what it looks like, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, and it's something we try to encourage. I think there's no doubt that our platform, it's a world-class product engine that we can create very quickly. Part of the interestingly, when we do that with clients, part of the challenge is sort of reining them back and going, right, this isn't ready to go live. This is a prototype to really enable that thought process. So I guess if we can shorten that part of the process and almost take IT off the critical path, what's left? What do the companies need to put around that, wrap around it to make it a fully blown product they can take premium from?
Well, so it's a machine of people and process, in my view. So can you repeat it? Can you really dedicate someone from each function into that cross-functional team where, like any team, they get better and better at playing their game, right? Which is product delivery. So at Beazley in the US, we had an admitted carrier, surplus lines carrier. Launching products was the number one thing we needed to do. So we eventually, as we kind of trialed out and different ways of working, formed that cross-functional team with that central organization, what I was describing before. And we were able to quickly take an idea, do an assessment of it. So is it actually worth doing? So we'd have 100 ideas in a year. Well, we'd only take forward 10 because they were the ones that met the criteria to go through to the next stage. And then we would be able to quickly iterate and bring together the different functions. And, resources like compliance, so that, it really became obvious that we needed to make sure everything we were doing was compliant, because obviously it's an admitted market. Actuarial and the pricing side of it was absolutely critical. And as was marketing, and then that would really free up the IT people to actually do it like one and done. If you get what I mean. So you're not just having to keep reworking everything all the time.
Does that speak to sorry, that's a closed question, but that sort of speaks to a culture of innovation, as in have any ideas, fine, crazy or not, and we'll distill it down to the ones you want to do. Was that a reasonable way of summing up what you had there?
Yeah. I think innovation was always looked at as a huge strength at Beazley, and I think it is at lots of companies. Beazley is no different there. But innovation without the control and the discipline is basically wasting money, I would say.
Yeah. So it certainly feels like there's opportunity out there, particularly in the specialty market, for more products. But where do you see people sort of trying to put their time and attention? Which kind of products are out there that are really or gaps in the market that people are trying to fill?
Well, often it's simply keeping your product fresh. So how are you making sure that it's not, you've got like your standard form, how's it then not just being weighted down by endorsement packs at the back of it to keep it alive, right? So make sure that product can compete. You've got to keep adding different features, and you add them as endorsements that ride on the back of the policy. Every couple of years, you've really got to look at all those endorsements and condense them and put them back into the main policy, probably. So I think a lot of it is keeping all your products fresh, iterating those products, and having an ability so that the underwriting team and the operation that are not frightened of doing those changes every couple of years, because it's going to be so expensive.
And I'll play your own words back to you. You're an IT guy, which is fine. Let's bring it sort of to IT then, and platforms really, because you just mentioned there that sort of making change on a regular basis. The word change can frighten quite a few people, and particularly any what I would call business users that are watching this. How can platforms be a force for good? Because often change can take months. So when we go back to the original question of, idea to premium, a common answer to that is, but IT gets in the way and we have to wait for change. What can be done to sort of shorten that cycle?
Well, I think, as we've all learned over the years, iterative, incremental change, constant change is far better than one-off change every couple of years. It's just because what that does is force you to build a muscle to always be adjusting yourself, always implementing change. So you're making often small changes that don't necessarily break things as much. So if there is a slight issue, then you can quickly fix it because you've got an iterative weekly change happening. So my view, and this is really, Gerry, how we first met.
Well, it's just memory lane. I may cry, but for many reasons.
At Beazley, we had a test practice which was very manual, and then I engaged with you and your company at the time to really automate our testing, and our investment in testing went through the roof, like literally, because it needed to enable our ability to do automated testing, do that regression test back very, very quickly. So having the agility and speed to do testing cheaply and quickly, it requires that initial upfront investment. But I think as technology has moved on quite since
many years ago. Yeah. I'm pleased to say.
But I think it's still there in that you need to be able to run those test cases. You need to be able to quickly test things, and testing just becomes the cornerstone from which you can then rely on doing frequent change, I would say.
Yeah, and I think just sort of taking it to sort of the platform world, obviously in the insurance market broadly, not just sort of specialty or London market, particularly with the sort of medium-sized, large companies, there's a huge investment in core platforms, which is absolutely understandable. Where do you see that sort of the principle of maybe taking some of the logic out of that and moving sort of the product logic out and above to try to give that agility? Because I think it would be a reasonable statement to say there's a lack of agility in core systems in terms of getting new products on there. What's your sort of view on that?
Well, I think
pros and cons.
Yeah, broadly, you're talking about, I think, like modular. People call it microservices, but I'd rather call it modular architecture. So keep your product definition really. Does that really need to sit in the core of your system in your back end? I don't think so. But equally, the reason why I was talking earlier about finance and operations being part of that cross-functional team, there's no use building a product at the front end that doesn't fit into your ledger. Yeah. So your testing and your automation's got to fit all across all of it, but you've got to be able to componentize it and separate those things, I feel. So I think I'm not really keen on these monolithic large policy admin systems that do the whole front to back, unless I can see that their architecture is actually modular, but I find that quite rare.
And because you sort of just picked up on something you said there, a lot of this seems to come back to how a company structures itself and how it focuses on not just innovation in general, but products specifically. With Folio Group, I know you're consulting with loads of insurance organisations. How do you see the uptake of that? How do you see them sort of the willingness to change, maybe the structurally and the organisation side of things, to give innovation, a culture of innovation that you mentioned earlier?
Well, I think everyone's got the want to do that. It's just whether or not they understand the commitment they have to do for it, I would say.
Right.
And so, the mind wants to, but is the body willing? And I think lots of people only really realise that once they've gone through that process quite a few times. And you can really tell the difference between, in my example earlier, the underwriter who has done it before and understands how to kind of win friends and influence people across the organisation and get everyone to work behind them to kind of and support them. It's strangely a missing skill in lots of people, I would say.
Yeah, I think is there a danger though that becomes a personality force rather than a repeatable model? So an underwriter knows his way around the organisation or her way around the organisation and gets things done because he's got the loudest voice, as opposed to a culture where everybody has ideas and everybody can get those structured accordingly.
Well,
it's a leading question. You've got to say yes to that, obviously.
I don't think it should be the personality, no. But I think, the personality, as in it shouldn't be the one that shouts loudest.
Yep.
It should be the one who gets on with everybody the most and appreciates everyone's contributions. Because we're all human. We all like being appreciated. Yeah. And it's surprising how it can quickly switch in any kind of delivery, but product in particular, because you've got the pressure of going live on a date, etc. It can sometimes switch to the way that you wouldn't want, where it's kind of them and us, and that's where,
so particularly from an IT perspective as well.
Well, yeah,
as in IT over there, business over there.
Yeah, but I don't really like IT business as a differentiator. I like to call it, as I would say to my teams, it's us and then the rest of the business. Like we are part of the business. We're one of the most critical aspects of the business, and so I just call out the different functions all the time, as opposed to calling them the business.
Yeah, and that's a very, very nice way of putting it, Ben. I'm sure people will steal that. So to get it away from the sort of the individual just driving it, it's an individual might drive it, might lead it, but they need that collective around them across functions. Yeah,
and they need to have that, and it's that appreciation of people's capabilities and functions, and putting yourself in their shoes, and then just reinforcing, giving them confidence and thanking people. I've had underwriting leads who have sponsored delivery, and it's often in that individual's attitude that would really dictate success.
Okay. I'm conscious that we're sat under our logo, and we're a vendor and platform. You can't see it's behind you, but where do vendors sit in this? And this isn't actually a leading question. It's what should people expect from their vendor, but also what they shouldn't. We're not sitting here saying we're the answer to every single challenge around innovation with products, but what can we expect and what shouldn't we expect?
So I'll just talk about the kind of vendor I don't like, or I don't mean the actual technology itself. It's the way they engage with our sponsors, our underwriters, or operations, or executives. Is they'll often come in and say, "Oh, don't worry about your IT team," and that for me is a naive vendor. And trying to kind of gain business through kind of really saying, "Oh yeah, your IT team's slow." Well, the IT team's slow because it's got a lot of stuff it's trying to support and keep safe for the company, and actually they're just good measures and safeguards that they have in place. So being a vendor who also says, I had one vendor once say to me, "Oh, your underwriters can now do the product development." I was like, "Well, aren't they meant to underwrite?" It's just a silly thing to say, isn't it? Really, you want professional product developers doing that, and that could be someone who comes from any kind of background, but actually they've got to have the discipline of how to do change management, which is not just willy-nilly changing stuff, and having proper version control, having the ability to roll back, all those kind of capabilities that an IT function has built over years and years of understanding of change management. You can't just suddenly assume that a non-technology person without those disciplines can actually handle that properly for an organisation.
So I know we've done it, and you've done many others, sort of hackathons, things like that, proof of concepts. They are amazing, and they really get people's buy-in. But is there a challenge for the vendor there to set the expectation accordingly, which is, this isn't business as usual, this is we're showing you a concept here. Where have you seen that sort of done well, maybe not so well?
Yeah, I find it's often not the people in the hackathon, it's the people sitting outside watching the hackathon from a distance whose expectations are beyond what's actually been achieved, because they don't see all the other things that have happened in the hackathon, which is actually relationships building. And actually, the best hackathons have got cross-functional teams in them, and you're suddenly seeing the underwriter appreciating the engineer, appreciating the test automator, and saying, "Wow, they really understand our business. Oh, they're great." And having that appreciation for each other, I think, is one of my, it seems soft, but I think it's a soft skill or anything, but it's actually a really hard deliverable for me, is that you build those relationships across teams and build that appreciation of each other.
So is that something that yourself, Folio, recommend to clients, to say, look, you've got to get this thing off the ground, and the sooner you can get people to see something, the better, but don't think that's just going into production the next day?
Yeah, Paul and I have definitely, over the years, got a lot from that. I think, I have an example at Beazley where we had a hackathon, and it was all around, we had these different teams competing, but one team decided they were going to create an API enabled D&O product, I think it was, and all the other teams ended up using their APIs in the hackathon, to prove out their.
Well, they must have won then, surely.
Well, yeah. So the API team won by, it's clearly right. It was foregone conclusion. And then later on, eventually Beazley then launched API enabled products through with brokers. But it took quite a long time, but it unlocked a lot of people thinking, oh, we can't do this. That's not possible. So as long as you do caveat that this is not production ready and everything, I think it unlocks those relationships that I talked about earlier, but also lets people think a bit beyond what's currently possible.
And I know from, we've known each other a long time, I know there's been examples where you've really shrunk that idea to premium journey down to weeks, I think, and certainly at the time at Beazley. Give us a flavour for what that looked like and the big takeaways from it.
Well, so we got product launches down to 6 weeks in the US, which, sounds brilliant, which it was.
It does sound brilliant. Yeah. Well, I started with 9 months earlier, so it's just fine. Yeah.
But it was also a kind of a sensible approach, which meant that you weren't trying to build a fully rich feature-rich product that was the most complicated in 6 weeks. If you're trying to do that, you're crazy, right? So what you're trying to do is help the underwriting team test the product a bit. Right. So you say, look, we'll invest 6 weeks of this time and it'll cost you this much money. And so we were able to predictably launch a product, but it wouldn't have everything on it.
So and then was it be more of an MVP though? Or that,
but an MVP within a kind of a model that we knew that we could do a product like in this shape and then gradually add the features to it, which would make it more and more efficient and scalable. But some products would never go past that 6 week initial delivery because they wouldn't sell like we thought they would.
But they would. But from at 6 weeks, they would sell. There would be something to sell. There would be premium taken.
Yeah. Well, if they didn't, we definitely wouldn't do any more.
Fell faster.
I'm sure there were examples where that was the case. Yeah.
How did you? What techniques did you use to sort of manage your your business colleagues?
Yeah.
Expectations, because often we see we want this, we want that, and basically the MVP becomes the whole product.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
It's really difficult because people naturally feel that you're going to deliver them a product and then disappear. So you are going to be, I use an expression, fly-by-night project cowboys, right? So you come in, cut the scope, hit the deadline, and then
go on
leave.
A podcast and say you did it in 6 weeks.
Yeah. So this goes back to saying, well, actually, there is a product team that's going to be here forever. The people will be long-standing in those teams. They'll move around and we'll have fresh talent in there, but that will be a long-standing product management, product delivery team that are there for you. And then if you've got great ideas and your product's selling the right way and it's doing the things we thought it would, they're not just going to disappear. They're a long-standing team. And Beazley allowed us to say, well, actually, that's no longer our change budget. That's our run budget, which is to continuously enhance products. Now, when you're running hundreds of products, there's obviously a queue, right?
Yeah.
So it's incumbent on the leadership of that business function to kind of grow the budget that we spend on that BAU change. But it's also incumbent on the underwriting teams to really kind of fight for and represent their own products and what they want as new features.
And this is a leading question, bit of a warning. As somebody who's just put themselves out there as an IT person, where do you stand on the fact that platforms are evolving, AI is evolving, and notwithstanding your comment on, anybody putting something into production needs to understand the way to roll that out. What's your view on putting the power into the hands of the user, if you will, rather than just IT? How far could we go?
Well, again, it goes back to what you mean by a user.
So somebody who's not in IT.
Well, so whoever...
Don't buy yourself time to answer the question by giving up.
Whoever is the product, let's call it product configurer, right? Yeah. Who is that person? Well, I don't care where they come from, as long as they've got the discipline to understand that they can't just overwrite the product version on a Tuesday morning. They've got to have some discipline around the release of that.
And the platform has to have that as well, of course.
Yeah, and I think if the platform can support that, it can support people moving into that kind of career of, and the user in that case is actually the product admin, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's it.
I don't really care where that person comes from, or it's an interesting role to be doing, isn't it? And probably very fulfilling. It doesn't necessarily need to be an IT person, but you have to just work out how much you want to put under change control within the IT function. And you can do things like standard change, etc., which is more automated. And for me, it's the job of the IT team to get out of the way of that process.
Yeah, and we see that in terms of, simple examples like I'm going to add a question to the form, or but how does that affect rating and pricing? I think, certainly our view at FintechOS, providing all of that is understood, documented, and version control, which is there, then surely we can short circuit the process.
Yeah.
But I guess if I can put words in your mouth, as long as there's a guardrails there to make sure that nothing can be done that's untoward, get it in the hands of the product owner.
Yeah, people got to understand the only reason why the IT department want to be there is because they don't want to be fixing the issues afterwards.
Yeah.
And, an IT function is the one that gets called at the weekend and in the middle of the night to fix everyone else's issues.
Yeah.
Because that's our responsibility. So we just need to make sure those guardrails, as you say, are there. And, we don't want to be involved in every change at all. So we can create things like standard changes which just don't require the level of scrutiny because they are BAU change, right? So if we can get the technology to support that, and then we'll let the teams free up and do that.
I suppose there's an element of IT having to sort of save the business from itself as well. You don't go too far with it, but that's fine, and that's where we're coming from. As long as you've got the capability within the platform, why not put it in the business unit's users' hands? In terms of, we got back to sort of people, process, technology, I'd like to leave people with a sort of takeaway from these things. The people thing seems to have been one of the biggest sort of areas here. What's the key things? Sort of cross-functional teams, no sort of hero complex of one person doing it. Just sort of summarise where you think people should concentrate.
Well, you've got to look at it from front to back of the organisation. So right from the submission coming in, or even before that, where you're marketing it, right, all the way through to it's hit the ledger and it's in the numbers and it's got all the right controls in there. So if you're SOX compliant, if you're part of a US organisation, or it's properly auditable in the Solvency II way. I think you've just got to be able to follow that premium all the way through. That was the advice I was given when I first started working in somewhere in the 90s. Follow the money was what my mentor used to say. She used to say, look, make sure you can track that premium all the way through. Okay. And that's when your job's done, when you see it go to the end. So that cross-functional team, having people from different functions along that values stream of insurance, having people represented in that product team, make sure that you have got the eyes on that and that everyone's focused on the full outcome. Okay,
and from a process perspective, we talked about taking IT off the critical path or taking aspects of IT off it. Feels like the bring it to life, get people behind it is sort of the first step of that.
Yeah, let people see it and how it's going to be working, because you can't rely on everyone to be able to read a diagram like I can that I drew, because that's the way my brain works, but that's not how other people work. So it's I think it's just understanding that there's a reason why we're all in IT is because we're a bit geeky and we like a picture and a user story, right? Not everyone is able to respond to that and see the precision in our language or whatever that you can get from actually seeing the product on the screen or in a policy pack. So
when you're talking to clients at Folio, actively encouraging them to do things like hackathons and proof of concept?
Absolutely, yeah. We use it all the time. But it's just us carrying on our kind of what we've learned over the years.
But I think and it sort of takes us into the sort of the people process, the last bit being technology, as platforms like ours, for example, mature and introduce new functionality, particularly with our investment in AI, for example. Clients people who aren't IT being able to use natural language to talk to a platform. Do you see that as a sort of step change in terms of where things could go?
Yeah, absolutely, and why not, right? I think the way the IT team and IT jobs are impacted by that is just going to be the same for it's the same for every type of profession, I would say, in an insurance company in this example. So accountants are going to be impacted by it. Yeah. Marketers are, underwriters obviously. So we're all going to be impacted, and I think the IT professionals that embrace that and make sure actually they're at the forefront of how to make sure that's got the guardrails and is actually going to work for the business. That's where you're going to really keep yourself relevant as far as the role's concerned.
And that was a sort of follow-up question would be, what would you? I know you've run IT teams. That's how we know each other. What would you be saying to that team now if they saw a platform like FintechOS and all that specking you needed to do and all that wireframes that you used to build was gone? What would you be saying to them?
You've just if you're not if in IT, and I don't think this is a problem actually in my experience. If you're not curious and you're not looking to change and amend and be thinking about our role as an IT function within an insurance company is to be really have very strong business acumen and understand the way insurance works and understand the way technology can be applied to insurance to make the business more successful. If that's not your driver, then you're going to struggle to have a long-term career.
And like you said, you're all part of the business, so it's still about how do you make the business more successful, really. And
I think as an IT function, we're in. I always say this: we're in a quite unique position. There are not many functions within a business that have got such a view of across the entire organisation. Like I said before, across the whole insurance value stream.
It's cross-function by definition, isn't it?
So we're the ones who know most people across the organisation. We're the ones who know underwriters, know claims managers, finance, etc., all the way through the value stream. We've got relationships across that, so we should be maximising that, in my view.
Yeah, that's good. The final thing I want to just get your view on, and this is sort of with your Folio hat on. I really like what you said about the sort of the culture of innovation that you experienced at Beazley and I'm sure other places as well. How have you seen that across the market? Obviously, pretty much the London market, specialty market. Do you see? Is it a 50-50 split? Those that are really embracing innovation? Not. I mean, I'm not trying to give you the answer, but where are you seeing that?
Well, I think the whole market is very innovative. I think Beazley did a really good job of kind of representing the market as, from London. Beazley obviously an international business, but at the heart of it was this kind of innovative ethos, which was really typical of lots of Lloyd's entities or London market entities. So I think it exists in all these places, and there's that, like I was saying before, the ambition's there, but I think there's just patchy capability because it's difficult when you're trying to drive innovation from, say, a product mindset, which can be quite front end viewed, when actually you don't understand the whole value chain. And who needs to be involved in that change is, like I say, front to back. And when you've got a team that's lopsided and they don't really understand the full life cycle, that's when it becomes really difficult, I think.
And I guess the sort of creating a new product's the sexy bit, isn't it? And all the bits behind it, maybe less so, but it's all important. So, okay. So in summary, then, it's the whole organisation needs to be behind innovation, behind new products. It can't be done in isolation.
Yeah, and I think the thing we did really well at Beazley, the leadership at Beazley did really well, was saying that this is part of our DNA, and they talked about it all the time. I'm sure other organisations just do the same.
But so when you're out there with Folio, let's get people thinking about the culture of innovation, get the whole business behind it. Ben, we could talk all day, but we won't. But I really appreciate you taking the time to share those thoughts. Really, really great insights, and I hope you'll be on the couch again at some point. And
thank you, Gerry. Back. Been very nice.
Pleasure.
Yeah, cheers.
So, hope you enjoyed that, everybody. There'll be more of this, more insurance content coming on Evolve very soon. But for the meantime, thanks for watching.